Welcome to this video, another video about the Python data analysis basics. In this video, we will have a look at Matplotlib. Matplotlib is one of the most popular libraries for Python when it comes to data visualization, so to creating charts in the end. So let's get started with this library in this video. To get started, you need Python installed on your machine, you need a Jupyter notebook, and you need Matplotlib installed. In case this is totally new for you, have a look at this video right here, where I'll dive into the basic installation steps. With that being set up, we can now start. And how do we start? Well, by importing Matplotlib to our project right here. For that, I'll simply type import, and now Matplotlib, like that. But now we have to add .pyplot right here. Pyplot is basically a submodule of Matplotlib, and it allows us to conveniently create charts, to plot charts basically in the end. For that, we import pyplot as PLT. That's the most common way how we use it. And then we have to add a second line. This is required if you use a Python free notebook, which is the case for us right here, as you can see right here, Python free, because we want to display the charts we create inline in our notebook and not in a separate window. Therefore, you simply have to add the % right here, and now matplotlib, plotlib space inline. This is it. If you now hit Shift and Enter, we are ready to get started with Matplotlib. Now the focus of this video is on the very basics of Matplotlib. Therefore, I don't want to use any external data. I just quickly enter some hard-coded real data though right here. The data I prepared is about stock prices, not really spectacular I would say, but it's enough for our purposes. So let's add the Apple price right here, maybe like this. Equals, and now create a list right here. And now I have to look up the values, so I will forward the video a bit to let you type the numbers on your own. So that's the first thing. These are the stock prices of the Apple stock, and I took the prices all round about mid-November of the corresponding year. We'll have a look at the years in a few seconds. And now we need a second price range, and I think a good choice would be the Microsoft price. Let's call it MS price right here. Now same logic, I'll create a list, enter the values in, and fast forward the video. So that's it. With that we have our two prices right here, and now we need the years also. So let's call this variable year right here, and the prices are from 2014, 2015, 2016, 17, and 2018. As I said, all prices are taken around about mid-November, but it's not the core focus of this video. Now with that, we can hit Shift and Enter once again, and we got our data. The thing now is that we want to visualize that information right here. And the easiest way to do so is to simply create a simple line chart. We can do this by simply typing PLT. You remember, we imported Matplotlib, so the pyplot submodule as PLT. So plt.plot. This simply means that we want to use this submodule to create a line chart. That's basically what this is telling us. Now for this line chart, we need data, and we defined the data in our variables up here. So if we now simply open the brackets right here and now enter the value for our x-axis, that's the first value right here, which could be the years in our case, so this one right here. So we simply type year like that, and now we enter the values for our y-axis, and these could be right here the values stored in our Apple price variable. So let's type Apple APL underscore price like that. Now with that, we told pyplot that we want to create a line chart with this information inside of it. Now we have to tell pyplot also that we want to show this chart now. Now I said the command already, we simply type plt.show and now two brackets. And if we now hit Shift and Enter, boom, here we are. Here we created our line chart. If you watched the first video of the series, this is not totally new for you, but as you could see, this is just as simple as it is to create a basic line chart in Python. Now, the formatting of the years is not really good down here, as you can see it with these decimal numbers after the actual value. We'll have a look at that in a few seconds, so please ignore that for now. But the thing is that by just creating the chart, we are not done yet. Because we could say that we need labels maybe for this chart. Always something you want to add here. To do that, and that's also the reason why show has to be added right here separately, because basically we can now add additional things that we want to have in our chart. We can have an impact on the formatting, for example. So you can remember that as basically telling Python that we want to create a chart and defining all our parameters, all our things that should be displayed. And as a last step, we tell Python, and now please show our final chart. Now I talked about the labels, so we can simply add a label by typing plt.x label. Again, really simple. And now we could give our x label a name. I think a good name would be year, for example, for the x label. And now we plot our y label also. And a good name right here could be maybe stock price, something like that. And don't forget these single quotation marks as I just did it. Now with that, if we hit Shift and Enter once again, you can see that we added the stock price right here on the y-axis and we added the year on the x-axis. Now, we don't have a single stock price only. We also got our Microsoft stock price right here. Now for that, we basically have two options how we can achieve this. One could be to again type plt.plot. Now again use our year variable, but now use the MS price right here. If we do that and hit Shift and Enter, you can see that we also added our Microsoft stock in our chart and it automatically changed the color. So this is one way how we can display these two charts right here. We could also change the way our, let's say, our Microsoft chart is displayed. We could quickly change this from a normal line chart to a scattered line chart. For that, you simply change plot right here to scatter, like that. If you now hit Shift and Enter, you can see that the, Microsoft price is now displayed as a scattered chart. So this is one way how we can achieve this right here. But let's say we don't want to have the scattered chart right here, but we want to have this plot style for both our stock prices. If we want that, we can get rid of this second line right here. Now simply go back to our first code, add a comma, and maybe hit Enter to add it in the second line. And now type year once again, so the value for our x-axis, and now add the MS price right here. If we do that and hit Shift and Enter, you can see that we again display both our stock prices, but now in one single chart and included in this single code right here. Now you could still say that you want to format these two line charts a bit differently. So this means you want to have an impact onto the actual line style. You can already see, for example, that we have two different colors here by default. And let's say you don't like these colors. Let's say you want Apple to be, I don't know, maybe black, and you want Microsoft to be something like green. So for that, you simply go right here back to the code, and after the comma you add single quotation marks again and another comma, because this code right here basically refers to this part of the chart, so it's kind of a connected part, you could say. And if you want to have a black line for the Apple price, you can simply type K right here. If you do that and hit Shift and Enter, you can see that we now changed the line color. More information on the different colors available can be found in the link in the video description, by the way. Now, we can also change the color for the Microsoft price, of course. It's the same logic. We simply add a comma right here, now add single quotation marks, and now type G for green, I would assume. So let's hit Shift and Enter, and as you can see, we now have that green line style right here. Besides the actual color of the line, we can also work on the line style itself. For that, you simply add the line style like this, for example. If you hit Shift and Enter now, you can see that we have this kind of dashed line style right here. There are also other line styles available, for example, this one right here. If you enter that colon, then you have this, lighter dashes, as I would call them. Or if you add an O right here, like that, then you got this scattered style once again. So that's another way how you can have an impact onto the line style. More information about the line style and the different line properties can be found here. As I said, you can also find a link in the video description. But for example, these are some line styles we applied right here. And this one, for example. But I don't want to dive too deep into these. As you can see, you have lots of things that you can customize right here. So let's go back to our Jupyter Notebook now. Because another typical use case you might have is that you want to define the limits for the x and the y axis. In our case, we saw that the limits were created automatically by Pyplot, but let's say you want to customize these a bit more. For that, we simply type plot axis like that, and now simply create a list of the values that we want to have. The first value is the minimum value for the x-axis, which in our case could be, let's say, 2013. To change this a bit, I know we don't have a value for that, but it's just to show you how this works. The second list item would be the maximum value for the x-axis, which could be 2019 in our case. I know it's 2018 again, but just for testing purposes. And now we have to define the minimum value and the maximum value for the y-axis. Now the minimum value could be right here, maybe something like 20. And the maximum value could be, let's say, something like 180. If we do that and hit Shift and Enter, you can see that we indeed changed our x and y axis values. We start with 2014 right here, 13 right here, and we end with 2019, and we start with 20 and go up to 180. By the way, also the decimals were changed automatically, but as I said, we'll have a look at that in a few minutes. Now, we can do this right here, but actually I'm happy with the default axis, so we can simply comment this out with the hashtag and now simply get back our initial chart style. And these are actually the basics for our basic plotting logic right here. So simply using that plt.plot, create the line chart, and then we're playing around with it. The thing is that Pyplot is a lot more powerful than that. And the general logic behind Pyplot is not just this simple plotting thing right here. Pyplot thinks in figures, axis with an E, not with an I, then the actual axis with an I, and the actual content of the chart, you could say. The figure basically defines the entire space where your charts are displayed. With the axis, you define the area of each single visual, and then the axes are the actual axis of each single visual you have. So the x-axis and the y-axis with the corresponding content, a line chart, for example. In our case, we basically have the figure created automatically. So the space where our axes are displayed. I refer to the axis now as the actual visual. I think that is easier to remember. So we have a figure which defines the space of our actual chart. Then this chart is displayed right here with its x and y axis and with the actual content. Now the thing is, we basically created this figure automatically right here. And we can also create this step by step, which makes a lot of sense for us, especially if we want to understand how Pyplot is actually working. Now let's create such a figure to understand this step by step. For that, I'll create another variable, let's call it fig1 for figure1, and set it equal to plt, that's the command we already know, and now add the figure method right here. This will allow us to create a figure. We can now open the brackets, and now we have the option to add an integer right here. This will basically add this number to the figure and hold it as a number attribute. So we could add 1 right here, for example. And now we can also add another option, which is the so-called fig size, the figure size, which basically defines the space of our figure, which in the end will contain all our charts. The fig size is defined like this. So you type fig size and set it equal to 6.4 and 4.8. Now why 6.4 and 4.8? These are the default values for your figure, so basically also the values used right here for the width, right here, and for the height. We will change these of course, but let's stick to the standard values for the moment. You can also define additional things right here for the figure, but let's stick to the basics and continue. Now with that, we created our figure. Here you can see the width and the height once again. This is in pixels, I think, and this, by the way, is in inches, so not in centimeters or something like that. And we basically defined the space where we want to display our axis, so our charts in there, basically. I will also refer to our axis, so basically the area where our chart is plotted, as chart now, because I think it's easier to remember it like that. Now what we need here is we need to add these charts to our figure. For that, I will again define two variables. One will be called chart1. And I will refer to our fig1 that we just created and now use the add subplot method, because add subplot will basically add, well, a chart to our figure right here. Let's select this and now open brackets. And now we'll add 3 numbers, and you probably won't understand why I add these, but we'll come back to that in a few seconds, I promise. For the moment, let's just add 1, 2, 1 right here. Now, we also want to display the Microsoft stock price, so we will add chart 2 right here. Set it equal to figure 1 dot add subplot once again, and now enter 1, 2, 2. So a slight difference. We will see what this means in a few seconds. With that, if we hit Shift and Enter, we can see already that we have created 2 charts, 2 subplots here. These subplots are now part of our actual figure. I can prove this to you if I increase the width right here to, let's say, 20, for example, and hit Shift and Enter. You can also see that our 2 charts increase the width and split the room available in our figure equally. So that's the core logic here. You have the figure, which defines the entire space, this 20 inches right here. And then you have the 2 subplots that we added, which are now part of that figure. Each subplot, each chart, or each axis is basically this space right here, or that space right there, and comes with 2 axes, the x-axis and the y-axis. A lot of axis and axis right there. That's why I will stick to figure, chart, and axis. I think that's a lot easier. Now the problem is that our charts are now basically available as kind of raw templates, you could say, but they don't contain any kind of information. For that, we can simply change that by now referring to chart 1 right here, like that, add a dot, and now, well, basically do what we learned before. We can simply enter dot plot, and now we simply have to add our data that we want to display. In our case, this was year, and I think Apple price, like that. And we can do the same thing for chart 2, dot scatter maybe, let's use a scatter chart, and add year and MS price, like that. If we Shift and Enter, we can see that we created our 2 charts right here, and if we enter PLT show like that, then we also display them correctly, so without that output stuff. So with that, we basically have created 2 charts in our figure, and we can also refer to the different charts by our different variable names right here. But what about these numbers here? I talked about these a few seconds ago. Well, these numbers basically define how many charts you want to display in your figure and how the chart you're referring to, so in our case chart 1, the Apple chart, where this chart is positioned inside the structure. In our case, we simply created a 1.2 grid right here. So we have 1 row right there with 2 columns. And inside this grid, our chart 1 is positioned on the first position, so to the left right here. If I would change this to 2 and go to chart 2 and change it to 1, kind of vice versa, and hit Shift and Enter, you can see that both charts switch their position, because now we still have our 1.2 grid, so 1 row, 2 columns, but our first chart is now positioned on the second position. And by the way, let's also change the variable names now, because I think it got clear. So let's call this Apple price, and let's call this maybe Microsoft price, like that, and also change the name right here and right there, because I think this makes it easier to remember, like that. So we have this grid structure, and we can define the position of our charts in there. But we can also create different grids. We could, for example, say we want to have 2 rows and 2 columns. If we do this and hit Shift and Enter, you can see that nothing changes on the first side, but the height of our 2 charts decreased, of course, because remember, we defined the size of our figure up here. So if I would now change this to, let's say, 9.6, so twice the value we had before, then we kind of got back the height of our 2 charts that we had in the beginning. But we now have a 2.2 grid, so actually we would be able to display 4 different charts in there. I can prove this to you if I change the number right here for our Apple price chart to 4. If I do this and hit Shift and Enter, you can exactly see the structure that we created inside our figure. We have the figure right here. We have 2 rows and 2 columns. And the first position inside the grid right here is the one for our Microsoft price, this one. And the last position, so in the right bottom corner, we have the Apple price chart now. So with that approach, you can easily create such grids and define the position of these different charts inside your grid, inside your figure, and also refer to these charts individually right here by the variable name. Now we will stick to our 1.2 grid, I would say, because I think it's enough for our purposes. Let's change it to 2, like that. And maybe let's also decrease the size, let's say to 5. Like this, I think this looks fine. Now before we continue, let's come back to the beginning. Because there I told you that we will have a look at the formatting of our years down here, because it still doesn't look right. For that we have to go back to the top right here and import from Matplotlib .ticker, because we want to have an impact onto our data ticks, onto our tickers down there. And we want to import the max and locator, like that. Let's hit Shift and Enter, let's go down, and let's have a look at the documentation to see what I actually did right here. So here we are, link can be found in the video description. And well, you can see right here what we can do with this ticker we just imported. It allows us to configure the tick locating and the formatting. And if you look right here at the N locator, the max N locator, you can see that it will help us to find a maximum number of intervals and set the ticks at nice locations. Now, for the dataset we have, this is actually totally enough and all we need, because if we now go back to our Jupyter notebook right here, back in the chart, so down here, and now maybe right here below our Apple price, so say apple_price.tab. If we now type X, you can see that we can refer to the X-axis, so let's hit Enter. Now add another dot and type S. And if you now scroll down a bit, you can see that we have our major locator right here. This is what we will need, so let's select this one. And let's open the brackets, and let's now say that our max N locator, so the one that we imported previously, and open the brackets right here, should be used. So we want to find these nice tick marks, these nice positions for the tick marks, and it should be set to an integer. So integer should be equal to true. Now, if this all worked correctly, if I now hit Shift and Enter, we should see that our integers or our x-axis numbers became integers, and with that the formatting became a lot nicer. We can also quickly do the same thing for our Apple chart right here by copying that down there and adding Microsoft price right here. Let's hit Shift and Enter once again. And as you can see, with that, we also formatted our x-axis down here. So this is how we can basically get started with Matplotlib and how we can create such subplots. Now, one last thing I would like to show you in this video is a way how to create these subplots quicker, because we only have 2 subplots right now, but we always have to add the subplot right here. We have to define the grid and the position and so on. Not really convenient if you want to have a lot of subplots. For that, let's go down right here and let's now combine some things in one single code line. Let's call this figure 2. Like that, and now add a comma and add axis right here. So basically we want to create a figure, and this figure should contain some axis. Without diving too much into the code behind and how this logically works, this is basically what is written right here. We can now set this equal to plt.subplot as subplots, because we want to add multiple plots to our figure right here. Now we can define the grid size. So let's say we want to create a 1.2 grid once again. And we can also define the fig size as we did it before. Let's say this should be equal to 20.5. Once again, the same structure we had above right here. If we now add plt show, we can see exactly the same grid that we had before, but created with one single line of code, which is a lot more convenient, as I would say. And if you now say, well, I'm not happy with the grid structure, I want to have a, 3 rows and 2 columns grid, you simply change the 1 to 3, hit Shift and Enter, and as you can see, you get these 3 grid lines. Keep in mind that the figure still defines the entire space available for our plots right here. So if you change this to 10 right here, for example, the space increases and you get a nice formatting or more space to display your charts, I should say. So this is how you can create these subplots quicker. And if you now want to refer, but for our purposes, I think that the 1.2 grid is again nicer, and let's maybe change it back to 5. And if you now want to refer to the different subplots right here, because you want to add some information to it, you can simply go right here and type axis, open the square brackets, and now simply say that you want to refer to the chart with the index 0 right here. Now, this should become a scatter chart. I'm just taking the values right here. And it should contain the year and the Apple price. If I do this and hit Shift and Enter, you can see that I got the values for the, I'm sorry, this should be the Microsoft price up here for our scatter chart. So you can change it to MS price right here, like that. Now we got it. And you can also refer to the chart with the index number of 1 in our figure right here by adding dot plot maybe year and Apple price. Like that, hit Shift and Enter, and you can see it works fine. If I would increase it now to a 2.2 grid, I get an error because I need to be more precise about the index, because here we have the row index, 0, but we also need the column index, which could be 1 in our case. So we want to display Microsoft right here in this chart, and we want to display, let's say, Apple in 1.0, so in the second row, because index starts at 0 with the first row, and so on. And so it should be the row with the index number 1, so the second row, and the first column, so it should be here. So let's see if this works. If I hit Shift and Enter, you can see that we have the Microsoft price being displayed right here, and we got the Apple price displayed in the left lower chart right there. And with that, I also want to finish this introduction video to Matplotlib. I hope you got a basic idea how easy to use Matplotlib is in the beginning, but you might also have seen already that it is really powerful and that you can do a lot of things with it. So you can dive a lot deeper, and we probably also will in some other videos on this channel. But for the moment, this is everything you need to get started, I think. And with that, I can only say thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you in one of the next videos. Bye!